Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another uLaw webinar. And in today's topic, we're going to be covering the Getting Ready for Law Society Audit component of our webinar. And as quick housekeeping, this particular webinar has been approved by the Law Society of Upper Canada or Ontario for 1 hour of professionalism CPD credits. I repeat, LSUC has awarded 1 hour of professionalism credits for this 1 hour webinar, and this is a session that we're going to talk about the different components of the Law Society audit, as we always do, the do's and don'ts of how you can manage a legal accounting and practice management software to help you and enable you be always ready. That's what we call with the uLaw. How do you always be ready for an audit? And we're going to cover the expectations, what you should keep in mind right from the get-go, of how you can by design, prepare yourself for the inevitable, if you will, for the audit, and how you can continue to be consistent in ensuring that you're always available for an audit. Okay, so the whole idea is to ensure that you're ready right from the get-go by design for a Law Society audit and don't have to have the fear factor to when it actually does come towards the fag end of when you know there is an audit. Before I get started, I once again kindly request you to use our chat window to ask any questions that you may have. Today's presentation is purely going to be slide shares. We're not going to be demonstrating anything, but we're going to have a lot of conversations, and we kindly request you to participate in those conversations through your comments or Q&A that we and the support staff at uLaw would love to cover at the end of the session. Okay? Moving along to kind of the next slide, just to set the context. So every uLaw webinar has an agenda, and so does today's webinar on Law Society Audit. What we're going to cover in the next 1 hour are the components of what is an audit process or a process. Okay, what does that really entail? How do you prepare for an audit? What are the different components, such as the practice review, the financial review, and the technology review that govern this particular audit process. So we're going to divvy it up and actually granularly look at the different components that help you prepare and make yourself readily available for that audit process under these 3 categories of practice review, financial review, as well as technology review. And then we'll touch upon the professional conduct rules that govern the conduct review, about what's expected out of that. Obviously, that's outside the preview of, let's say, a legal accounting and practice management software, but we still wanted to touch upon that and highlight it as a component. And last but not the least, we're definitely motivated to share with you how you could utilize any legal accounting or practice management software and audit-proof yourself, and uLaw just being one of the many one of the softwares that's available for you to use and explore. Okay. All right. So, first question is, what is the audit? And a little segue to that is, why me? Okay. So, one of the explanations that we do know that every new legal practitioner in Canada does get audited within the first 16 to 18 months of his or her practice. So if you've just started, just like taxes, you can be rest assured that there is an audit that would be scheduled for your firm, whether it's an individual firm or a firm of individuals together. You could be assured of that audit process that's going to happen within that first 16 to 18 months. Okay, so it's really not why me. It's just when and how do I be prepared for that audit when it does happen. So it's not a question of if, it's really a question of when. And as I let our friends join in. Okay, so let's start with the purpose. So what is the real purpose? The purpose of the audit, as we see it and as we like to define it, the audit promotes and supports a high-quality law firm or legal firm record keeping by answering the questions and the guidance that's required to whether the different silos of legal practice that you conduct, whether it's mortgages, trust, and general record keeping, which is a very key component of the audit, and providing compliant and support within the boundaries of the Law Society's guidelines and requirements. So bottom line is, within all the guidelines that are provided, the boundaries that you have to work within, the audit provides you with the support and the recommendations as the outcome of that audit process, so that you can now run a very compliant, in many cases, work towards a profitable and a very successful legal firm. And then that's what we believe is the purpose. The fear factor obviously is a component of it. I mean, just like anyone else, an examination or an audit or a check is, it's always looked upon from a fear factor lens. But if you can be prepared for that day of the audit, right from get-go, what you're going to actually, in a way, force yourself to be is compliant right from day one, right from how you intake your client. And one of the core components that we felt in designing your legal firm's practice capabilities to be audit ready from get-go is fundamentally to understand what the rules are, what is expected in that audit, what am I expected to do, what are the questions that are going to be asked, and today's session is really to highlight and share with you what those different components are. Okay? And to the question of why me, the audit really is designed to be a proactive compliance measurement and a way to detect any early stage problems through recommendations that can be clarified or rectified. And the spot audits essentially help to measure the integrity of the legal firm, the filing of your financials, and assess the ongoing compliance within the financial record keeping requirements, again, governed by your individual jurisdictions. Okay? I know it's kind of a convoluted definition, but as I said, the purpose is to, keep you informed of ensuring that whether you're on the right track or if you're not, giving you the recommendations to be on the right track of compliance. And there's really no question of why me. It's just a matter of when, because you can be rest assured of you being audited. And I think after that initial audit is done, based on the recommendations that you've been provided, a subsequent audit is something that's on a case-by-case basis. Okay? So let's now focus really on the core of one of the core components of today's presentation is what am I being audited on? Okay? And the segue or the slight subliminal context to it is, when do I think about it? So the quick answer is you're always thinking about it. Think about it, how you can prepare for it from day one. But let's focus really on the bigger question, which is, what am I being audited on? Okay? So we spoke about those three core components that a legal accounting and practice management software as a tool can help you with. So it's whether it's the practice review, the financial review, as well as the technology review of how you safeguard files and how you communicate the toolkits that you would be using to serve your clients. So those are the first three components that we'll highlight and talk about. And then the fourth aspect that you're being audited on are professional time management components, which are truly ensuring that you're well within the professional conduct rules that govern you as a legal professional in your jurisdiction. Okay? So let's kind of really divvy it up. So practice review, what does that mean? What truly it means is the firm properly managing components of its practice, which are the clients or your customers, the matters, the files that you open for those individual clients, and the procedures as per the guidelines. So what are the procedures? And again, we're going to look at it in the next sections. But really the procedures are you doing the right client intake? Are you ensuring that you capture the source of contact? Are you doing your conflict screenings? Those are all the procedures that govern when you intake a client. Okay, so are you doing your conflict screening? And then when we move on to a matter, then we're looking at the procedures that are governed by that matter. Okay, so auditors are looking for, is this file number unique, or do you have duplicate file numbers, which can then be a problem, right? Is this date stamped, so you can always search for it and you know when you created it? Making sure this is easily indexable, which is a very core component, so you're not wasting time, which kind of goes back to your time management as a legal practice. So those are kind of the boundaries. And then when you move on to create, invoices or accept retainers, the rules that govern that are the components of, is it trust compliant? Is the money going into your trust account? Are you taking the right due diligence steps to ensure you're compliant for both trust and general as you transact dollars amount for your client? So practice review is all about that. Okay, so whether you're well defined within the procedures of how you manage that. Then comes your financial review, and it kind of touches upon practice review from the invoicing and the file management aspect of that. Is the firm handling the trust and general accounts as per the design of the bookkeeping guidelines of the Law Society? Okay, so the Law Society has ground rules about how to manage your books. As I've mentioned, trust, general, ensuring that you've got a trust account. If you don't have a trust account, as I always say, then it really doesn't matter. You're just managing your general. But if you do have your trust account, it's very important that you actually manage all the funds within that trust account right from the get-go. Make it part of your design. Understand what the rules are, and be ready always for that audit. Okay, so that's really what a big part of your financial review is. It's all the ledgers, the journals, and the documents, the financial documents that are required to support your case of being a compliant legal firm. The technology review is ensuring that you as a firm can safeguard and protect yourself and protect yourself from lawsuits, protect your clients from embarrassments in terms of technology failures or failures. When I talk about failures, I think it's a big term. It's really, how do you ensure that you have a backup plan if the components of your law firm's technology suite does not fall in place? Okay, so let's say you're using a computer. Do you have a plan if your computer crashes? Are you dependent on that one individual computer? Do you automate the backup process of your data, or is that all residing in that one machine? And if someone were to steal that machine, then that's pretty much it. Or the other side is you're techno-savvy legal professional, and you're actually on the cloud. You've got information available to you at all times, but then have you spoken to the providers of such solutions about the security? Is this HTTPS? Is this bank-grade security? How often do you automate the backup? What is the general availability of these solutions on the cloud? How do you manage third-party hacking into your system? So as long as you have answers, and you have to go find those answers and ask those pertinent questions to your providers and have them ready as part of that technology review, if you will, making sure that you have an answer and a backup plan, and really a way to mitigate the risks of running that firm on that technology platform, regardless of whether it's on the cloud or not. Okay? And the last component, as I mentioned, very high level, would be the conduct, professional time management. So if you've got complaints from customers, let's say, you do, as a legal professional, the fact that this is an open society, you start to hear about complaints from the general public, because you are serving the general public at times. Let's say you don't go to the court on time, you don't do what you're supposed to do as a professional, you don't conduct yourself well, you don't keep up time, These are components outside of the practice management and the financial aspects to it. These are just your personal characteristics and your conduct of behavior, which includes time management and professional conduct. That's something that's being looked upon as well. How do you manage time? Do you have a calendar to manage the multiple different files that you're doing? They may actually ask for feedback on how you manage multiple files, especially if your areas of practice demands that. So keeping in mind that these are some of the core components of an audit, knowing that it is, and now looking at a plan of action of how do I approach this audit, how do I prepare myself, let's say for an audit that's coming next, and preparing my law firm for audit proofing by using the right tools and the processes so that you're always audit ready. Okay, that's kind of the next set of actions that we're going to be highlighting about. So just a disclaimer is you really need to be thinking about the audit every day and build compliance into the DNA of your firm's process and procedural execution to ensure that you're well covered within these 4 major components of your audit. Okay? So now that we've spoken about the components, now let's kind of move ahead to now talk about how do you prepare yourself for that audit. And, it's great to be talking about always being prepared, but, is that a very idealistic thought process, or is it truly possible to be audit ready at all times? And if so, how do we get there from where we are? Okay, so let's first understand how you prepare yourself for the audit. And a quick, point that we wanted to get out there, and I think we speak for ourselves from our experience, from the clients that we've served and their experience within audits, as well as in speaking with a few auditors ourselves who are thought leaders in their own right. The audits were fundamentally, were never designed as a fear-mongering or a way to scare the law firm or legal firm. Obviously, sometimes fear actually helps, certain individuals, but it was never designed to be a fear factor component. It was always designed to help. It was really not to, catch you on the wrong foot, but if it's the case, then, you just have to accept it and be willing to learn from that experience. But if you obviously repeat those mistakes, then there's obviously no room for, repetitive mistakes. It's because really not a mistake if you do it the second time because you knew it from the first audit that you shouldn't have done it. So some auditors may actually have interim audits or spot audits and a secondary audit if they're not comfortable with the records that you've presented the first time around. But truly, they were designed to be a measure to find any issues or problems that there may be in how you run your business as a legal firm and be able to correct them, really. I mean, if you look at yourself as a legal professional, a good, successful legal professional in Canada or North America, it's a job for life as long as you like what you're doing it, right? So this is, a good lifetime value of a lawyer or a legal professional is right from 5 to 6 years to could be 40, 50 years. I mean, we serve one of the earliest legal professionals within our product, who was one of the first, paralegals in Ontario. So you do have this as a long profession. So having these audit checkpoints as early as 16 to 18 months, because there's so much other things that there's only so many auditors, and that's why they give you that time. So yeah, it's always designed to find issues early on, correct them if you can, and then make it part of your process, make it part of that daily execution so you don't repeat those mistakes. That being the case, the real question is, why not start from day one and do it every day? So it's not, don't wait for the auditor to tell you what you should have done, through CPDs, through learning, through reading. We're going to share at the end of this presentation a few slides, a few review materials that you can look at, the bookkeeping guidelines, the audit checklist that truly educates you of how you can manage and what you should manage to be audit ready. And we will highlight, as a vendor in this space, the different tools that you could use to actually help you through that process. Okay? So if you were to start this from day one, what are the components that you would look at? So you would look at all the practice procedures on a regular basis, review them, find the right tools that can help you automate certain process that you don't have to do it manually. On a quarterly basis, always review whether you're doing the client intake right, if you're capturing all of the components that goes into a client intake to keep you compliant. Are you ensuring that you and your staff are running the conflict screening reports every time you do a client intake? Are you recording that as a conflict screening checklist report in the right format? So those are the types of things that you probably want to review on a quarterly basis and refine and make that stuff better. Okay. With the advent of technology, such as uLaw and others, you now have the capacity to review your financial health statements, journals, ledgers more often than a month. You can do it on a weekly basis. You could do it bi-weekly, and at the least you would have to do it on a monthly basis. And then once a year, you probably want to do a quick check yourself, kind of do your own audit with that checklist and make sure that you're on the right track, both from an audit perspective and many times from a financial health perspective, so that you can continue to exist in this profession. Okay? So right from day one, let's figure out a plan of how you can be on top of your game and ensure that you're reviewing it on a regular basis to fine-tune it to stay compliant and profitable. Okay? So if we were to start with checklist, we kind of had some ideas that we've actually highlighted here. I mean, you can have your own way of defining what that checklist should look like, but some pointers that we wanted to start with. A great way to get started is really reviewing your bank accounts on a weekly basis. Kind of do your, if you can do it on a daily basis, because sometimes you're busy and life gets in the way, but at least have it done on a weekly basis on a weekend. Spend the 15, 20 minutes or the half an hour that week demands to reconcile your bank accounts, validate them, make sure that your books are in line with what your bank tells you, or the other way around. Have a monthly financial checklist. Okay, so prepare as the Law Society recommends, at a minimum, do it on a monthly basis. Prepare your trust and general ledgers and all the journals and the reconciliation statements for all your clients on a monthly basis at a minimum. Okay. In fact, you are required to sign off on the reconciliation statements on a monthly basis to begin with, but just instead of it being mandated on you, if you can find a way and come to peace with doing it just as a habit, a very, healthy corporate habit, if you will, then you obviously save yourself a lot of grief, when time comes to audit. You really save yourself time, and you would be far more confident about approaching an audit because you know that you've done it right from the get-go, and there's really no room for slack there. Now, besides doing your weekly bank reconciliations, your monthly, ledgers and journals, you always want to look at from a practice management perspective, and it's one of the things we spoke about in the slide before. Review how you communicate with your clients. Okay, these are things that you don't want to look at it on a weekly basis, but at least on a, every 3 to 6 months, maybe there's an opportunity and a room for improvement. How do you communicate with your clients? Are you sending letters? Are you sending emails mostly? How do you manage time if you have 20 different POA matters that you're running all the time? Or if you're just running with one criminal matter that's taking a long time to do. Regardless of your style and your area of practice, how do you manage time between what you do as a professional, attending, CPD sessions like these, having time for yourself personally, for your family? So how do you manage time, both from a professional and a personal commitment? And early on we spoke about what are the procedures to manage your files? Okay, do that checklist on a quarterly or every 6 months. And if you're doing really well, and if it's working and it's easy to repeat that, then great. Then you know that you're on the right path. Have conversations with colleagues. Try to understand during that drink or coffee about how they're doing their books. How are they managing it? What are the tools and the technologies that they use to help them through this process? Okay. And another good checkpoint, kind of going with a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then a yearly review, is really reviewing your business. Okay. So how have you performed as a business? What areas of practice have you excelled in? What areas of practice did you think you will do well, but financially it did not reflect in your books? So maybe you are really good at, litigation, but unfortunately, those silos of practice did not reap the benefits, didn't give you the revenue. Maybe you're not marketing yourself as a litigator in the market. Where is your money coming from? Is it small claims? Is it family law? Is it Wilson estate? Those are the types of things that can help you pivot in the right time so that you're not repeating your mistakes and you're able to proactively change course if you're not going down the right path. Okay? And this is purely from you running your firm and the financial health of it. You wanted to earn a six-figure income for your firm, and if you are getting towards that, then that's a great sign. If you're not, then you want to go back to the drawing board and really look at what's happened and how you can change course, right? So I know I'm preaching to the choir beyond a point, but sometimes repeating ourselves to say the right things all the time kind of emphasizes that to do it from the get-go. Okay? So now let's take with another good 30 minutes ahead of us, let's start looking at those individual checklists or reviews. So we looked at practice management, we looked at financial. Let's look at them one at a time. And when you look at a practice management checklist, and we've done this through one of our other CPDs as well, this is obviously a smaller component to it, but it still plays a huge role in defining this as an audit checklist. It's the client service and communication. So this is something that you're going to be asked during an audit is, hey, how do you manage your dockets? How do you manage matters? How do you manage time, etc., right? So let's kind of quickly go through one of them one at a time. Docketing and a detailed note-taking process is key when handling client matters. It's a given, but we're repeating ourselves only because many times, in a very subliminal way, we tend to forget these core aspects to it. Okay, so sometimes if you're not using a software, you're not using a process, and if you're writing it on yellow sheets and you're scampering for time, then reminding yourself of what you should do right can always help. If you're handling trust money, and we've mentioned this in many of our sessions, it is very important that you manage and maintain it well within the boundaries of the bookkeeping guidelines, just as that's expected to be managed. So for example, if you accept a cash retainer, a law society guideline talks about how you need to deposit it back into your trust account within 24 hours. Okay? So are you doing that? If so, great. If not, let's refine that process. Maybe you stop taking cash retainers. Okay? Maybe it's a policy change within your firm that says, hey, you know what? I can't deal with this. I'm just going to accept some trackable forms, not cash. It's got to be either check or otherwise. Handling joint retainers and other parties associated in the matter. How do you track, record all the different parties that are involved within a matter? Okay? Because that's very important for you to do a conflict screening. So every step of the way, you want to keep in mind how you are handling these components of a practice management checklist. How do you manage procedures and clarifications, complaints about the fees that you have? So do you have a well-defined retainer letter? Do you have a well-defined service letter that outlines what you bring to the table as a legal professional and what's expected of your client in terms of fee payment, in terms of days on sale, if it's a net 30 or a net 60, do you have a well-documented way of doing that? These are questions that are asked because if someone were to complain that you didn't have that to begin with, then that's a learning. So let's try and implement that right from the get-go. How do you provide updates to clients? A great example is if this is an ongoing case, coming up with a pattern of providing interim bills so that your client doesn't just get one fat bill at the end of the matter. Okay, so, or if you're just providing a service, quickly send out a letter that outlines the key tasks, whether billable or non-billable, that were accomplished during a month, so that your client knows that you're working for him and this is the effort that has gone in representing him or her. How do you manage matter closures? Very key component. It's sometimes overlooked because opening a matter and getting your money is a big part of your business and you're running. But to have a logical closure even within the matters, it's important that you have a process to handle that. And if a matter closure was because of the fact that you didn't like working with that client, that needs to be well defined as well. Do you have a process for that? So bottom line, what it comes down to is for these core areas of the checklist as part of the practice management to begin with, do you have an answer and do you have a formal process that can deal with answering it the right way? And if you have to non-engage the client or if the client non-engages you, do you have a well-defined process to simplify that? Can you make it easier on both yourself and your client to non-engage? Okay? And it helps with ghost clients. And the term ghost clients obviously are those who are just flirting with the idea, never retain you, but have given you some information that may be used against you if there's a conflict. Okay, so just kind of moving along with that practice management, we first looked at one aspect of it. Now let's look at the matter management and the components of it, right? So we've kind of just broken it down, if you will. So within the first slide, we looked at client service and communication, and we're kind of looking at matter management. These are checklists too. And as I mentioned, do you have a good file naming convention? Is it easy for you to search for that file? Your auditor may not harp on this. You're not going to be scrutinized on this. You're going to be obviously, they're going to make suggestions, but it's still a part of that checklist. And at the end of the session, I will share with you an audit checklist that's actually available. And if you're not already looking at it, probably be a great way to get started with preparing yourself. Little things like, do you separate matter file names from client? What if a client has multiple matters? How do you manage and organize those files? You can't have the same file number just because it's the same client, right? How do you process time in terms of dockets? Have you defined how you would work it out? Is it time and material, flat rate? Even if it's a pro bono, is that well defined? What is the process to get paid? Is it, net 30, net 60? And if you do accept trust money and if you do accept retainers, then do you have a retainer letter that can clearly outline the nature of the work, the fee structure? If they have to top up that retainer, let's say 80% after the first retainer is completed, replenished rather, then, is it just an email reminder or do you need to send them a letter to remind them to top it up? Okay, so try and answer these questions. All these are questions that we took out of the audit checklist ourselves. How do you manage dockets, disbursements? Because disbursements obviously are a big thing when it comes to, that's just money that you spend on behalf of your clients that need to be recovered and becomes a very critical component of the health of your business if you're not documenting those disbursements, because you're then not be able to recover those expenses on a timely basis. A very important aspect is, how do you manage a closure? Do you ensure that you send a statement of activity which outlines every work that was put in that matter? Based on the silo of practice, do you have a statement of settlement, Bill of Cost, and a closing letter which says, thank you very much for allowing me to represent you, and this is exactly what our law firm or legal firm has been able to do it, and we thank you for your business, and we hope you would refer us to other clients. Okay? Something as simple as that. Because in this business, referral business is a key component for not only building your name and brand, but actually getting repeat business from families and friends. We'll spend not too much time, but we'll quickly outline the retainer component, because if you do manage trust money, then this is an inevitable component or procedure in your practice management process. Okay. Obviously, we know what the retainer is. It's a fee paid in advance to you or someone in order to secure or keep their services when required. One of the very few professions in the world that can actually accept retainers in a legal way. And it's important that you document, especially when you're accepting it, components of the retainer, which are the nature and scope of work. What are you promising to do for this client on retain? If that person were to retain you, what is their obligation? We spoke about that. Retainer being renewed, payments being made on time, etc. Frequency of communication. Again, policies around how you accept cash retainers. And if there's a termination non-engagement, how do you govern that? If you're planning on using other consultants to actually complete the matter, communicate that to your client, because they need to know. Confidentiality, how do you manage your files? If it's on the cloud, how do you retain? Make that a part of the retainer letter, that you do use, let's say, cloud-based practice management software, but it is, safe, secure, bank-grade security, makes you more available, makes accessibility to files faster, and hence gives your client not only the confidence about the security of the file, but also gives them the confidence that you're going to be very efficient in what you do. Okay, and that's part of the risks, rewards of using technology, such as regardless of using email, your mobile phone, internet in general, etc. Okay, so we've kind of looked at the practice management aspects. So with another 20 minutes, I think we have enough time, and we're sailing towards the financial management, and then we'll look at the technology, and then finally a quick review on conduct, personal conduct, and the guidelines around that. Okay. So within the financial management checklist, very critical component, and this is where a big part of the fear factor comes. What should you be reviewing, and how do you ensure that your process ensures that checklist is available and you're ready right from day one? Okay. So first, let's look at the fee structure and handling retainer. Let's have a quick process for that. Make it part of your checklist. Does the retainer outline how you plan on capturing fee structure? It's going to be fixed, time and material, combination, could be contingent, it can be pro bono. So defining what that is, very important. Also defining what the disbursements are, and the fact that the client, either you have everything rolled up into one fee, or you say, what, I'm not going to charge you extra for disbursements, then that's your deal. But if you're going to be charging disbursements separately, then outline, if possible, the types of disbursements that one should expect based on the silo of practice. So if you have multiple silos of practice, then you do know what the usual suspects are. So outlining them in general could help. And again, if you're managing contingency and block fees, talk about how you manage that. How often does the retainer need to be refreshed? We spoke about disbursements and cost recovery. How do you plan on doing it? Are you going to be raising an invoice and moving money from trust to general? Or are you going to be doing disbursements right out of trust? Those have to be defined document, and a retainer letter is a great place to do it. So bottom line, quickly do a checklist today or tomorrow or next week about what your retainer letter covers. And if it covers these components, as these are components that are required to be asked in the audit checklist. Okay? If the retainer is updated in cash, how do you demonstrate the right ledgers and the procedures of how that cash retainer was handled? Okay? Do you provide a cash receipt for retainers? Do you provide a retainer receipt, period, regardless of what the payment is? How are you capturing all the cost recovery measures and the taxes? So certain disbursements may have taxes incurring, certain may not. Like a court fee or an application fee may not necessarily have a tax, but if you're doing a fax or if it's a travel mileage, you may want to charge HST. So keeping in mind all those different aspects and facets of your financial touch points and kind of having a plan would really help. And how do you communicate that in a formal way? A retainer letter is a great document to start. Okay? And then we've kind of broken it down to really pragmatic next steps. So you've created a file, what next? Right? You've got a retainer, what next? It really comes down to you docketing. And you've outlined in the retainer letter, how do you go about docketing and charging for your time and the work that you've done? Now what, right? Once you've put in the docket, it really comes down to these 4 critical financial touch points. Raise an invoice. Do you do it in a timely fashion? And we spoke about this. This is part of your client communication too. Do you wait for the entire matter to be done? Maybe in certain matters it makes sense. You know, if it's only a $500 POA, doesn't make sense to do, multiple, invoices. But if it's, it really comes down to the style of business, right? But you raise it in a timely manner. It also matters that if it's a POA matter, you want to raise that invoice as soon as it's done. You don't want to wait for a couple of months after the matter was completed to actually send that invoice. Are taxes being properly captured? Have you filed for a HST? If you've not, then you're not charging HST, keeping that in mind as well. Some clients, when they just get started, legal professionals, may not have a HST account. So when you charge $500, it's not $565. It's just $500. So keeping all that in mind when you raise an invoice and defining that in your retainer letter is critical. If your client were to complain about your fees, saying that you said this and you said that, or if your client really cannot pay you because something happened personally or within that company, if it's a corporate matter, and fundamentally, if shit were to hit the fan, do you have a process to manage that? Okay, so for example, do you have an ability to provide a discount, or if you have to write it off as a write-off to your business, how do you manage that? Okay, so it's one of those 2 things. Either you provide a deep discount, just saying, all right, it's not $1,000 anymore. I'm going to give you, cut some slack, give you a 30% discount. Just pay me the $700 and let's call it even. You may come down to that, or you may just write it off as a personal or as a business expense or a loss. Now that you raised an invoice and you kind of dealt with the different facets of that invoice, it comes down to if you're dealing with trust money or general and the different procedures that you take there. This is an important component of that checklist, right? If you are actually getting paid from trust because you have trust money, then for your own sanity, are you doing the right things to ensure that you're moving the pending trust transfers? Because we've actually dealt with customers who've done all the right things, raised an invoice, but forget to move that money from trust to general. because that's your money sitting on the table. And if you waited 3 months, time is money. So if you've not done the right thing at the right time, then that's money lost. So having that process, and these are things that your auditors would ask you for. Again, not to scrutinize you or find fault with you, but really to understand if you have a process and an answer for these things, because these are pragmatic, practical things that happen in the day-to-day life of a legal professional. And they expect you to have an answer and a process that answers that question. Okay? Same thing with general. Okay, how do you handle trust accounts? And what are all the procedures and documents that are required? And this is critical. So we talk about client trust ledgers. You've got your trust ledger. Then you've got your trust receipts and disbursements. Okay. Your monthly reconciliations, very, very important. You have to sign off on it at least on a monthly basis and file it and have it available. You're not sending it to anyone. You're not emailing that monthly reconciliation to anyone. But at the end of the 16th month, if you're getting audited, then you have 16 months of monthly reconciliation well documented and available. And that's all there is. And they may actually not look at all of those 16 reconciliation. The auditor may actually randomly choose a particular month and ask you for it, right? But being prepared always helps, right? If you are in the habit of doing electronic fund transfers, because you have, with the, again, advent of technology, if you open up a bank, TD, RBC, CIBC, even credit unions today actually give you the opportunity for online banking, and you may want to take advantage of that if you're moving money from trust to general. But if you do so, then there's a process and a legal guideline around it, which is there's a form called the Form 9A that is required, that needs to be filled out, that really outlines, okay, what is the debiting bank, what is the crediting bank, or rather what's the trust and general bank name, what is the bank account number, what was the purpose of moving that fund. So, a quick definition is, hey, I raised an invoice, and this is eligible trust money that I'm moving from a trust account into my general account. And you marry it back to the matter. The matter is married back to the retainer that it's married to, and hence you have, the legal right to move that money from trust to general. Then comes to the general account. Some clients may not use trust money at all. They don't have a trust account. They really are not in the business of accepting that. To them, it's just a general account, and then that's fine too. But there's still some process that you need to manage it. Are you managing a general ledger? So if you're getting paid, you're just not getting a retainer, but you're still getting paid for it. How do you manage the ledgers for that? Okay. How do you manage receipts? If you're getting paid, do you provide your clients a receipt for that payment? If you're raising expenses, how do you manage your journals, whether it's an expense journal or otherwise? A fee book is a very, very important audit requirement. A fee book really outlines each and every revenue touch point of your law firm, including your disbursements. Okay? The expense book obviously should marry back to the expenses and journals that you've had. And as I mentioned, if discounts and write-offs are part of your business, it's practical. The truth is it may happen. That needs to be managed and maintained too. It's not mandated that you show up a monthly general reconciliation statement. It is mandated to have a monthly trust reconciliation statement. But having said that, if the whole purpose was to ensure that you're on the right track and keep you on that track, by design, if you find a way to generate those general reconciliation statements as well, then you're obviously doing yourself well for that. So it's really not going by the mandated rules, but learning what those are, why they're asking for it, and just making it a part of your practice from day one. That way you're not force-fitting yourself to comply with that at the fag end of that audit. And if you are in that particular year, if you actually have to deal with taxes, very important that you manage the record keeping of all the taxes that you've received and paid for. Because, that goes back to whether you pay the government the HST or the government owes you HST based on which is greater or smaller. Okay? And we spoke about this, and I'm just going to quickly repeat myself, is how do you clarify communication, client updates, and how often do you do it? Clarifying invoices could be one. But again, the answer to that question is, how do you clarify your invoice? The answer to that is, I have a monthly statement of activity. I ensure I do interim bills. I have a bill of cost readily available, and I send it to my clients via email. Okay, check. Perfect. That's fantastic. Do you have a procedure for regular updates to clients, both by email, phone conversation, or in writing? Okay, do you send out this information? Do you call them and let them know? What's the process? If you actually have a process that's working for you, check. Great, fantastic, move on. Let's say everything is done, fine and dandy, and it's done. Even if it's a real estate matter and you're doing both the purchase and the sale of, let's say, the homes of your client, you may first want to finish off the one matter, close it logically so that your focus is now on the other matter, even if it's for the same client. Showing that level of sophistication in the definition of process from get-go would actually earn you a lot of brownie points in these audits, right? Okay, so we've kind of very quickly looked at the practice review checklist and the subcomponents of it. We looked at the financial management checklist, all your general ledgers and the money components, as well as the communication that goes along with the money. And now let's look at our technology review, which was one of the components. We'll briefly touch upon it. And again, going back to the question, so the real question the auditor asks you for is, all right, how do you back up and what are your security procedures? So let's just say that's the question. And the sub-questions are in that checklist, how are you backing up your computer data? If you are a one-man shop, there's only so much you can do. So if you actually have taken it upon yourself to manage the data in your personal computer, let's say use an Excel sheet, and all that data is in that laptop, then that's what it is. You explain yourself and how you manage to back it up. So maybe you have a process that every day you back up that Excel sheet in another machine, okay, or in a hard drive. There's no one way that's right, but it's important that you have the answers for the path that you've chosen to accomplish these. Okay, cloud, having it on the cloud has its advantages. You just have to ensure that the compliance and the security aspects that govern it are solid, rock solid. For Canadian clients, obviously lawyers and paralegals, you want to make sure that the data is hosted here in Canada. That's a big check for yourself if you can accomplish that. And have robust are the tools that you're using, again, both from a security standpoint, accessibility standpoint, and availability. Because what that really means is on a Saturday afternoon, if you really need that information, is it available, or are the servers only available Monday to Friday type of thing? Okay. So looking at legal accounting packages, practice management software such as uLaw, and others. You have other choices. But do the due diligence to ask all the pertinent questions to your service provider about, antivirus. Ensure that each and every server, what's the process of these companies to run antivirus software on their network? Do they have backup? Let's look at the fine print and ensure that you're well covered from a technology review. Okay? And even if you're using your own laptop, do you have an antivirus in your machine? If your particular laptop with that software installed on it, let's say a desktop software, let's say your laptop is lost or it crashes, and it happens all the time, what is your backup plan? These are questions that the auditors would ask you for, and you just need to have the answers for it. And as I mentioned in the retainer letter, the question is, are there any risks of using certain technologies? If you're using cloud, the auditor may ask, have you outlined the risks involved to your clients in using that technology? So a retainer letter is a great way. The answer is yes, I do, because I outlined that in my retainer letter, that I do use these softwares and these are on the cloud, but I've done my due diligence to ensure that it's secure. But these are the risks that we run. When you look at email, there is no one Canadian hosted email. If you're using Gmail, you can rest assured that it's not necessarily the data is being hosted in Canada, right? But there's a risk reward. You outline what that is. And with 5 more minutes left in my presentation, do want to get to this last slide, which is really the reference that we want to give you. This presentation will be made available on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. So Monday, you should have a link. So I sincerely request everyone who's participated in today's webinar to send us a quick email confirming your attendance so that we can then send you this link to this webinar, and also helps with ensuring that we're being asked for your presence in this CPD session. So Spot Audit, a great reference. Okay, I think it's a quick question. Is it possible to quickly show us how to generate the monthly reports that are required? Certainly, I can do that real quick before I jump into that. Spot Audit checklist. Kindly do have a look at that checklist and some frequently asked questions about the audit. The bookkeeping guidelines, okay, it really outlines all of the key components, especially the financial aspects to your legal business. The bookkeeping guideline is a great resource for you to review. Okay. And why use a practice management or a legal accounting software is, by design, these tools are meant to capture events as and when they happen, because that's a key component to running your business. If by design you can capture it, as and when it happens and keep it close to your bank or your real life, that's all that the bookkeeping software has really accomplished, a key component of its task. Recording all your records, both financial and marrying it and reconciling it with your bank records, is much faster, simpler, because that's what a legal accounting software enables you to do. Okay. And then, if the software can also enable compliance as part of its, product, again, you don't have to necessarily choose between cloud or non-cloud. You can, if there's a product that's not necessarily in the cloud, but it kind of gives you all the bells and whistles that you need to run your business, by all means. But it's being on the cloud obviously is a convenience. It's just a question of, and it's a cost factor too, because now with the advent of technology, these things on the cloud don't cost as much as, let's say, a desktop solution. But you are the one who makes that determination. At the end of the day, for an audit checklist and compliance, it's ensuring that you have the right tools to be successful, but most specifically the procedures that are required, regardless of what software you use, to run those procedures to stay compliant. A legal accounting software or practice management is just a convenience that can make your lives easier by design to do that right from the get-go. Okay? I think there's a quick question about how do I run this. And I'm going to quickly switch gears. I've just paused it for a quick second. And I'm just going to switch gears into just using uLaw as an example, because we don't have access to any other software otherwise. Just to show you where the compliance documents are. Okay, and we'll take that feedback. Thank you very much. I think that there was a corrective feedback that we changed the slide from legal to law society. which we sincerely appreciate and will do. Okay, so I'm sure you can see my screen right now. So within our accounts category, you just have it in one single compliance panel, all of the Law Society's requirements and the documents that are required for you to generate on a monthly basis. So client's trust for the month of October is a matter of generating that. So we know that you've downloaded the trust ledger for the month of October. Okay. And that's what the ledger looks like. By client tells you the invoices, receipts, as well as the balance in trust. So it's under accounts, document generation, and compliance. The most important component, obviously, is the reconciliation, especially if it's in the trust. I mean, if there's one thing you want to take away from today's session is making sure you have a plan of action to have that reconciliation done on a monthly basis or a weekly basis even, and keeping it as close to your bank, okay? The whole goal is your bookkeeping software, you've told your bookkeeping software something about when a particular transaction happened. The real goal here is to keep it married to what's really happened in life. So for example, if that retainer of $1,000 was told that you received it on the 10th, but let's say you held it with you and you only deposited it on the 3rd and it reflected at your bank on the 4th of October, all you're doing is telling this reconciliation report that the bookkeeping software says 2nd, but in real life this was the 4th. Okay, that's all there is. It's really capturing the right information between the bookkeeping software and the bank. And if that information is not available, then backtracking to make sure why it was not available and how it can be made available. And little things like bank errors. These are all the pragmatic aspects to it. So sometimes happens that a trust account, your bank would actually withdraw a service fee. They actually take away $6 from that bank account. Then that's what it is. You categorize it and make sure it's available, and you're reflecting on it. Sometimes they may actually pay an interest. So if they have paid you an interest of $7, that's an extra $7 that your bank is telling you that your bookkeeping software does not know. And that's all there is. So the reconciliation report is the fundamental, and if you have that well established in a process to get it done on a monthly basis, then all other reports and the data of all those reports are pristine. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the feedback. With that being said, I sincerely, again, thank you for joining us. And again, I kindly do request you to send in your email with your confirmation of having attended this. And if there's any feedback or questions that you may have, we kindly request you to send it to us at support@ulawpractice.com, and we'll be happy to respond back to you. And we will make this session available to you via email as early as Monday. Okay? Thank you very much.